Hello everyone! Today I have a new update about Focus, and this time I'm very excited about it because I've been working on the UI. So as you can see, this looks a lot better than it did before, and I want to tell you how I've been working on this. Before we get into the UI though, I also want to mention some things I didn't talk about last time that I also think are interesting. For example, one of them is routing. So you will notice that whenever you change the current list, the URL also changes. This is using VRouter under the hood, and the way it works is that you declare your routes and which component is going to be rendered for each route. In this case, we only have two routes in the application so far. The first one is the home route, and this is the one that I will show to users who is the first time that they are visiting the application or they don't have any data yet. And then whenever you create your first task, we are going to show the workspace route, which is the one that shows the workspaces and the lists. So in this case, as you can see, we have two segments in the URL. One of them indicates the workspace, another one the list. So for example, if we go to a different workspace, this will be updated as well. So this is indicated here with URL segments, and so far this is the way that VRouter works, and if you have used it before, this will be nothing new to you. But there are also some things I have done in Aerogel that are specific. For example, something else that changes is the title of the page. So for example, here if you go to a different list, you will see that the URL of the title of the tab is also being updated. This is implemented in the title function. So it takes the params of the URL of the current route and it returns a string to indicate which title the page should have. And in this case, you will also notice that the params are not plain strings taken from the URL. They are actually SOCI models. This works because I have implemented something called route model binding, which I learned from Laravel. You can indicate how each segment is resolved. In this case, we have workspace and list, as they have been declared here. And taking the slash, which is the string in the URL, you can look at all the workspaces in your application and find the one that matches the slash. And that is what the route component and the route title function is going to receive when you look at the parameters. So this is a couple of things that are quite handy and you can do with Aerogel that are not implemented in VRouter out of the box. Something else I have been implementing is reactivity. In case you don't know what that means, I suggest that you read about it in the Vue documentation. But the basic idea is that when you are changing something in the UI, it should be updated everywhere else in the UI, not just the component you are changing. So here, for example, if we toggle this component flag, you will notice that it changes in the tasks list as well, not only in this panel. So this works with Vue's reactivity under the hood, but there are also some specific functions to Aerogel. For example, if we look for the computed models helper, we will notice that we are using it here, and the basic idea is the same as the computed function in Vue, but it's also looking at changes in the task collection. So whenever a new task is created or removed, this will be recomputed as well. So this is some handy way to watch model changes without having to do everything manually. Something else that I already talked about in the first Aerogel video is forms. So in this case, you can see that here we have one form, and if we go to look at the component where this is declared, we are using the useForm helper, the same one I introduced in the very first video in this series about Aerogel. So here I am using a new input. This one is called date input, and it is going to return an actual JavaScript date. So whenever you submit the form, you will see that this is taking a date and everything is casted automatically. You don't have to take into account how to parse strings or parse timestamps or whatever. So this is the kind of developer experience that I want to create with Aerogel and forms. And finally, something else interesting to mention is internationalization. I am using this plugin under the hood, and if you open the settings of the application, you will notice that you can change the language and the UI is updated everywhere. In this case, only a couple of strings have been translated. This is why not everything is changing, but it should work everywhere. If you look at the code itself, you will notice there is a folder called lang with all the translations. In case you want to add a new one, you only have to create a new file here and declare it in the locales.json object, so that you can see how this is displayed in the UI. And if we look at the user settings, you will notice that this is just a normal select, and we are binding using vmodel to the locale property in the lang service, which comes built in with Aerogel. And this is basically how you would be working with translations in Aerogel. So all of this comes out of the box, and it's quite easy to work with. So finally, let's get into the UI. I have been using TailwindCSS. In case you don't like it, I have to say that at the beginning I didn't like it either, because when you look at the markup, it's quite funky and not easy to read. But when I gave it a chance and I tried it just to see how it went, I actually loved it, and I have been using it ever since. I haven't used anything else. So I really suggest that you at least give it a try for real and see how it feels for you. So I have been building everything from scratch using Tailwind, and Tailwind's also quite flexible. So for example, as you see, when I change workspaces, the color changes everywhere in the application. This is because I have been declaring a variable, a CSS variable called primary with different values, and whenever the workspace changes, I reset this CSS variable. And Tailwind also allows you to use custom variables. So it is quite flexible, and you can, whatever you can do with CSS, you can probably do it with Tailwind. And if in some situation you can't, you can always use CSS as well alongside Tailwind. It is not only one thing you can use. So yeah, basically I have done everything from scratch, so there is not a lot more to talk about it there. And something that is very helpful to make UIs of this type is Histoire. Maybe you have heard about Storybook before, which is something quite similar, but this one is made by the Vue core team. So the way Histoire works is that you declare sandboxes for your components, and you can see them in isolation here, and it's easier to work with. So for example, if we want to look at the buttons of the application, here you can see how it looks in all different states: disabled, focus, hovered, etc. And you can toggle different properties to see how changing things will affect the UI. And this is a much easier way to work with UI than opening an application and trying to find a use case where one component has the state that you want. So here I am doing it with buttons, for example, but you can also do it with more complex components. For example, here I have the task list item, which can have a lot of different use cases. Like, it could be flagged as important, it could have a description, it could have different dates, due dates, it could have different theme colors, etc. And as you can see here, whenever you change anything, you can see how it affects any of the different situations. Also, here we can see the task input to create new tasks, and make sure that everything looks properly whenever you change the code. Finally, Aerogel also comes with some built-in components. For example, for modals, we have some pretty common ones like alerts or confirm modals, etc. By default, Aerogel doesn't have any styling, so I have configured this for my own with my own classes and styles. And here it's very easy to see that everything looks properly and is working as expected. So this is also something quite handy to do. And with Aerogel, Histoire can also come configured out of the box, and you can even generate these stories for new components. So yeah, mostly that's everything I wanted to talk about today. I hope you find it useful. And if you want to try the application yourself, you can actually start using it today. I have released a beta, so I don't recommend using it in production, but you can already play with it and tinker and see if you want to give me some feedback or you have something you want to talk about. So yeah, that's it basically. I hope you found this interesting, and thank you for listening. Goodbye.